So HPV, human papillomavirus. All right. So this is a very commonly diagnosed virus. It can be either sexually transmitted virus. This is known for certain kinds of cancers in female, cervical cancer, uterine cancer, vaginal cancer, and it also affects men. So it also affects men. It's very common for men to have oral or esophageal cancers. Right. And so we're going to basically talk about the actual mechanism of how it works very simply. Right. So if we have a normal cell here, all right, we have a normal cell, and we're going to label this with N, right, versus a cancer cell in pink. Right. Ironically, pink matches the cervical, right, color, I guess, because breast cancer, cervical, sort of. Anyway. So we're going to look at these two different types of cells. So what makes a normal cell different from a cancer cell? So we know that a cancer cell is an abnormally dividing cell, right? So these two are basically different or the same. Well, they're the same, right? They come from the same cell type, but the difference between a normal cell versus a cancer cell is you still these abnormal, unregulated divisions, right? And so the way cancer cells are regulated, one pathway are these specific proteins called tumor suppressors. So we see these tumor suppressors that come in. And their main role here, if you see this flat line, this means blocking the cancer cells, okay? So these tumor suppressors, there's certain proteins, right, that are involved. Two specific, and one of the most widely studied tumor suppressors is P53 and RB proteins. So P53 protein, or retinoblastoma protein, right? Very commonly diagnosed. So patients with high prevalence of cancer have some kind of mutation in these two tumor suppressors, indicating that this defect leads to certain instances of unregulation of cell growth, right? And so these patients that are exposed to these human papillomaviruses, this specific virus comes in here and actually infects these tumor suppressors. So if I have HPV come here, HPV actually comes in, binds to these proteins, and destroys them. So now you have this inactive tumor suppressor. So what would happen mechanistically, right? So originally these tumor suppressors are coming in and inhibiting the growth of this cancer cell, right? No tumor suppressor means you don't have a regulation of these cancers. So HPV, if you make another arrow, actually leads to the progression of these different types of cancers. So we talked about, for example, cervical cancer in females. So cervical, what else? Vaginal, uterine cancers, right? Cancer of the uterus, right? So this is mainly for the females, right? Because males don't have these parts. Well, now you can kind of install them, not right? But anyway, we're not going to get into that too much. All right. So you have female, and then you have males, right? So in the males, majority of the cases, you see instances of oral cancers and esophageal cancers. All right. So esophageal cancers that are very highly prevalent. Okay. And one of the biggest symptoms, usually a lot of patients that have HPV, they're very asymptomatic, right? And that's why it's a very dangerous condition. I highly recommend you all, if you're sexually active, and if you think you are or aren't, right, what does that mean, sexually active? It means you're having sex, unprotected sex, or protected sex. You're still having sex. So I recommend always getting blood tested to see if you have any of these kind of conditions. But one of the biggest symptoms of these HPVs is these papillomas, so these warts. So a lot of these patients experience genital warts, right? And so my experience is in international work, what I had to do when I had patients that had HPV is I had to burn these certain kind of genital warts with these catheters, right? You can do other ways. You can freeze them, right? But very painful, very, very painful. And remember, it's in a very highly sensitive area, right? In the genitals. And then, so another thing that's really important too about this condition is vaccination. So I have a lot of students always asking me about vaccines, right? So should I get vaccinated? Will I be protected from the human papillomavirus, right? So what is a vaccine? So vaccine, real quick, is basically a pathogen that has been inactivated. When I mean inactivated, meaning is if I reinsert this pathogen that has been inactivated into your body, there is no chance of infection. So it's a pathogen that is not infectious, inserted into your body to create some kind of adaptive response, whether it's your cell-mediated or your humoral immunity, right? And so the way vaccines work is they grab these specific epitope that are part of the antigen that causes this. Now, HPV, when we look at human papillomavirus, it's dependent on the reason why, again, they recommend it for a lot of patients over the age of 12 that are sexually active, but a lot of patients that take HPV vaccines, if you remember, they usually use about 3 to 5 strains of these vaccines. And I want you to understand, for human papilloma, there's over 50 different strains of human papillomavirus, right? So are you protected from HPV if you were asking me if you were vaccinated? You would be probably from the 5 that they've used, right? The 5, again, is probably the most common of that specific region or the most common infection that leads to cervical cancer, right? But again, you have 45 plus more vaccines. So if you ask me to get vaccinated for HPV, that again won't really protect you from HPV because in a sense, the main way is the number one type of contraceptive. And what is the number one type of contraceptive to prevent any kind of HPV infection? Abstinence.